Hey guys, JJ here. It's been a very long time since I spoke to the camera, and I just wanted to very selfishly use this platform to document the learnings I had from this Enneagram workshop that I took part this whole weekend. I actually spent the 2 full days at this Enneagram workshop, and I had the opportunity to join this because of Cindy, who's a guest I had on my podcast about 2 weeks ago. So if you haven't watched the podcast, it's really all about relationships and all about Enneagram as well. So her specialization is in Enneagram, and Cindy very kindly offered to provide me a workshop to just have a taste of how her workshops are like in person as well. So I must say I was very thankful for it. So I went for this workshop not really having any expectations as well. This video serves as a very quick summary of my Enneagram type because I just want to summarize what I've learned and the reflections that I have for myself as well. This is a very selfish documentation on my side, and maybe for others to know me as well, because I think that the persona or the character that I put up on the internet might be very different from who I am offline, and I just wanted to use this platform to really maybe clarify who I really actually am behind the scenes, behind the camera itself. So I actually have the notebook that I got from the workshop. I was really very disturbed by it, of how accurate it was, to be honest. The way that it described my personality is really quite scary, and it also mentions some of the typical challenges that this Enneagram type always faces, and I really resonate with that kind of challenges as well. I'll just be going through my Enneagram type and hopefully let viewers have a better understanding of who I actually am behind the camera in real life. And I think that many of my friends or colleagues who I've worked with in real life can really attest to that, because sometimes my biggest fear is to really be the person who I am not on camera and off camera as well. I just want to present a very real picture. Hopefully this video is like super unedited and super raw, and that's really how I want it to be. In Enneagram, there are actually 9 types as well. So in this video, I won't be going through all these 9 types. If you want to go and find more information about it, go and Google it, or go and watch the podcast I have with Cindy that will give a very brief overview of what Enneagram really is. This 2-day workshop was really quite in detail. It went through in detail what are each of the Enneagram types and what are the kind of characteristics that you'll find, and more importantly, what you can work on, what kind of characteristics you can learn from other Enneagram to really make yourself a better human being in general. And I found it to be very, very fascinating. In this short video, I'll just be describing what my Enneagram type is and more about me in general. So my Enneagram type is actually type 5, which is the investigator. So the macro statement that describes this Enneagram type is that they are the master of their private world, and they always like to commit to a craft and be extremely specialized about it. So I really do resonate with that to a certain extent. Some of the general characteristics of the investigator is that they're wise, they're very analytical. Being analytical, I think it will be something that's part of my job scope, because I deal with numbers and graphs all day long, and to a certain extent I do see the thrill and excitement of like analyzing stuff as well. And one thing about investigators is that we are very rational, we are very logical, and to a certain extent we don't even use our emotions as well. Although we are able to rationalize everything step by step, emotions in a sense is hard to come by, or it's something that is hard for us to consider as well. And we are also knowledge hoarders. So knowledge hoarders in a sense whereby we take in so much information because we want to perfect our craft in something, and that's what I find myself to be guilty as well, because I take in a lot of information, I read a lot, I take quite a lot of online courses as well. But when it comes to taking action, the investigators usually take pride in just absorbing knowledge, but they don't really take any action, which is something that I'm extremely guilty of as well, because there are many side projects, many kind of videos that I want to make, many kinds of new connections that I want to form. I didn't really take the action in doing so, but I read a lot of books about networking, about business, about relationships, but I didn't really take any action on it, and it's something that I'm really guilty of as well. So knowledge hoarders, these are the people that like to amass a lot of knowledge, and they find their satisfaction in being good at their craft. Other characteristics of the investigator is they have a need for their own space. Contrary to popular belief, I'm actually more of an introvert rather than an extrovert. To be honest, I find it a little bit draining at times, and I always find myself withdrawing from social occasions because I really need the time for myself to recharge. And to be honest, more importantly, always involve myself in some kind of learning. So people always ask me what I do after working hours or what I do on a weekend, right? Most of the time, I'm always learning new things, whether it's learning lighting, editing, learning videography, basically always learning stuff. I take pride in always like absorbing a lot of information. I really do identify with the point that I'm a knowledge hoarder. I like to learn a lot, and that's where most of my time is spent on. One characteristic, or at least one of the discussions that we had about investigators, is that we are like octopuses, in a sense whereby we like to put our hands in a lot of different kind of project at once, because doing so many things at once gives us that sort of satisfaction as well. Adding on the responsibility of wanting to learn so many stuff at one go, right? We have our hands in so many things as well. That is the thing that gives us satisfaction as well. The principle of learning drives us a lot. So that's one of the key characteristics of the investigators. We are extremely objective and we want to master certain things, and we are logical problem solvers. I would say mastering in a certain sense, whereby I do agree with mastery. Like when I do something, I really want to get good at a particular craft very well, and I pride myself on being like an expert at that as well. One bad thing about the investigator is that they might be arrogant for the fact that they think that they know a lot, and they are unreachable and they are loners. So I would really identify with this as well, because I don't really see a lot of my colleagues or friends being similar like me to a certain extent, whereby they're always learning new stuff or taking up new skills. I always find myself to be the odd one out at times. Like, why do I really like learning so much stuff at one go? So because of that, they tend to withdraw from their social circles at sometimes, because they want to involve themselves in some learning project or just recharge at the same time. So at work, type 5 prefers freedom to pursue personal interest after working hours. That is something that I completely agree with. After work, what I usually do is usually have a run, but after that, I'm always either working on videos or learning some new skills in that sense, whether it's copywriting or building websites. Building websites on Webflow specifically, I'm spending a lot of time on that now, and that is something that fascinates me as well. The investigator also needs information beforehand and prefers predictability. So I think one of the points that the trainer said was that for type 5s, right, you don't want to throw them into a position where they are unprepared. You always want to tell them what's up. So let's say if you are going to give them a call, tell them what is the call about before just calling them on the spot and asking them questions that they might not be prepared for. So I think the trainer gave the analogy of how we need a certain processing time to think. If you put us on the spot, you'll be very embarrassed, and we just need that a little bit more extra time to rationalize, to think, and our thinking and processing time might be a little bit slower compared to the rest of the Enneagram types, and that's one characteristic that you want. So I do identify myself in this trait, because when it comes to calls with clients or at work, right, I'm sometimes very intimidated by the kind of questions that they might ask, because in the work that I do, I'm doing paid media as well. Like if you're asking me a question on a spot, and if I don't have access or knowledge of the particular numbers, I usually get stumped, and I'm very worried about that. So that's a point that I really strongly resonate with. So yes, we definitely need information beforehand. If you can provide information to what the call is about, what the email is about, what the question will be about, what the meeting will be about, I think it will be very helpful for type 5s, and it's something that I do as well. If let's say my director tells me, okay, this meeting will be about something, and I need to prepare for it, I literally think through what I usually have to say. I really strongly resonate with that point. Type 5 also freezes when unexpectedly questions or spontaneous reaction is called for. I think this is something that I've trained in a very bad way, smoke like during podcast sessions, because sometimes the guests will ask me questions and I'm not really sure how to respond, and I'll respond to that question with a question. But sometimes I really do agree that when it comes to answering difficult questions, I get stumped and I don't know what to say. Another point about the type 5, the investigators, is that they need to withdraw in order to figure things out. One behavior that I at least recognize about myself is that the trainer say that type 5 people like to observe people. So the analogy that she gave was that when it comes to, let's say, teaching people how to swim, right? Let's say you have all the children in a swimming pool. A type 5 child, right, would sit on the side, not in a pool, to watch people how they swim first. So they want to observe how people swim first before they do it, because they want to gather as much knowledge as they can before taking action in it. During the workshop itself, I must say, right, I do identify myself more as an introvert rather than an extrovert. I like the process of asking people questions and them responding, But when it comes to me sharing about my own stories and emotional baggage, you would say, right? I do tend to do very, very little of that because type 5 usually tend to be very safeguarded and very limited in their emotional expressions. It's very difficult for us to say that I feel this way because we are extremely hyper-logical, we are extremely rational people. So we are very logic-based, and if you ask us to talk about our feelings, right, it is difficult. And sometimes I would even describe myself as a person who might be even emotionless at times. The trainer actually called out and say, it's not that we are emotionless, but we take a long time to process the different kinds of reasons that are in our head before you really feel something. And that's what I resonate with as well, because when it comes to being emotive, or at least being open for people to ask me questions, right, that is something that I'm not very used to, especially when I don't know what they want to talk about. My response is very limited in that sense, and it really depends on the kind of questions that I receive or how the questions is followed up. One of the common pitfalls for type 5 is that we always have paralysis by analysis. We absorb so much information, but in the end we don't take any action because we are stunned by the vast amount of information. So that's something that I'm guilty of as well, but of course I'm overcoming it. I'm an eternal observer, so you don't want to be that. So in every Enneagram type, right, there are low levels of mastery and high levels of mastery. A low level meaning you are displaying a lot of negative traits of the type, and every type has its own negative trait, and every type has its good negative traits as well. It's like a spectrum. So a low mastery type 5 would be an eternal observer. He or she is always looking how people does it, but never really forces themselves to be in the activity that they're observing. That's something that I fall into as well, and which is I'm trying to fix it, right? Another pitfall for type 5 is that we are missing out on life itself, because we tend to redraw ourselves into doing our own work, into being involved in learning, into always improving ourselves to a certain extent. So we take pride in that. So type 5s are driven by the false sense of lack. So we always have like this false sense of lack, right? So we are always trying to hoard as much as possible, whether if it's in information or even like physically as well. But I think this workshop was talking more about like knowledge-based hoarding, whereby we like to hoard so much stuff. That's something that's definitely true for myself as well. And we might miss out on life because we tend to redraw ourselves so much into how we derive satisfaction from. We may be loner at times, and we may be unreachable as well. This is something that I identify as well, because when it comes to my close circle of friends, right, I must say my close circle of friends are really, really very little, because the good thing about type 5s is that we are independent, and a bad thing of it is we might be too extremely independent in a sense, and I do find myself very independent as well. Yeah, I guess one of the breakthroughs is that there is a need to be decisive and action-based. You need commitment as well. So that's something that I really need to force myself to be more accountable to. Ideally, in any kind of Enneagram situation, you want to always improve in having higher mastery, and that's why I always strive towards for. We have a false sense of lack, and that is what drives us, and we take pride in being specialized at our fields, but we are extremely private people as well. So it takes a lot to reach out to us or for us to share emotionally with others. And I must say that this is something that I do empathize with, because let's say during the podcast itself, I don't really share a lot about myself, and to be honest, I am uncomfortable to a certain extent in sharing a lot about myself because of my insecurities or whatever poison that is there, right? So I think I need to consciously be more vocal about my opinions and thoughts, and I think that would really help me to a certain extent. Taking action. So I think that when it comes to taking more bold action, meeting new people, or taking up more new opportunities, I think this is definitely an aspect that I need to work on as well. And yeah, I guess this is a very, very terrible summary of it, but I think this is a very rough breakdown of it, because this is meant to be a very raw video. How to help a type 5? Help me feel. Give me time to prepare. Don't text them after work hours. Give them their privacy. Don't be intrusive. And give me deadlines. And provide them the option to be helped as well. I mean, in conclusion, I will say that this Enneagram framework, I must say, I will dive into more detail about it, but I think that it really resonates to me in quite a disturbing manner, because I do identify a lot of traits there, but I'm quite curious to know which other facets of the Enneagram personality I have as well, because the kind of test that I went through was that it was a 180 question Enneagram test as well. So I believe it was quite thorough as well. But of course, it really depends on the mood on which you take the test as well. So it really depends. But that just serves as a very quick summary of the Enneagram workshop I've attended over the past 2 days, and hopefully it will be helpful to you. I'm not sure if I'm publishing this, but yeah, this just as a very fresh recap of the things that I've learned. Type 5 people, they are the masters of their private world. We are extremely private people, but we are extremely committed to our special knowledge. We are actually committed to having deep expertise and knowledge and learnings about a wide variety of topics. So we're very analytical, we are very logical, we are very rational, and we are hyper rational to a certain extent, whereby we don't even pay attention to our feelings at times. So one of the analogy that the trainer gave was that we are like a battery pack, and every time you ask us to prepare for something or attend a certain task, right, it takes up part of our battery. And because for the fear that we don't have enough energy to keep going, right, because there's always a false sense of lack, false sense of our battery lacking, we always like to hoard as much or conserve as much energy as we need to. Because we want to conserve as much energy or knowledge as possible, we tend to withdraw ourselves from certain occasions where we don't feel needed or wanted at times. We are unreachable because we are so obsessed in our craft of learning. We are loners at times. This is something that I must admit as well. I think I'm quite a loner to a certain extent, but if you ask me whether I'm lonely, I think there's this saying, whether you're lonely but not alone. Are you lonely but not alone? So I would say I'm alone, but I don't feel lonely because I find a lot of satisfaction into doing a lot of stuff, into like learning so many things. Like because my company recently like just paid for my Skillshare class, right? I'm like taking so many lessons from there, copywriting lessons, portrait photography lessons, video making lessons. I'm taking a lot of lessons from there. I really love Skillshare. Skillshare is something that I really like doing. And we are very objective, we are very rational, we are very analytical, and there's a need for space. We like privacy a lot. In general, I don't like people to like just call me directly. I need my own space to figure myself out or just do my own stuff, because I really just love doing my own stuff, if that makes sense to a certain extent. I think the trainer said that we are very in a sense, it might be selfish to a certain extent. Everything that we do really is for us to a certain extent, and that might be a weakness that we need to take note of as well. One weakness is that we tend to hoard so much information but not take action. So I think that we need to be action based, just execute and learn along the way, instead of taking so much theory in but not really experiencing the nature of what you are supposed to learn. So I think that's one of the reminders that I need to talk to myself as well, to just take action, like how I'm taking action in this video right now. Because honestly, I had like so many video ideas. I think I'll make like a more scripted, more structured video on this, but this serves as a very preliminary breakdown of what I've learned during the workshop over the past 2 days. So yeah, that's it for this video, and yeah, see you in the next one.